You know, it's occurred to me that I've spent the last third of 2022 watching and reacting to the Red Hood No One's Son web series by the Nintendo reviewer, and throughout my gaming journey I have not played, let alone reviewed, a Batman game. Well, I figured I should fix that. But which Batman game should I start with? This sounds about right. Before 2009, a plethora of games primarily featuring the Dark Knight of the DC Universe, the superhero Batman, had been released, and it's fair to say that the majority of them were probably average or terrible, a pattern for many a licensed video game. But that reputation surely didn't stop Eidos Interactive and Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment experimenting with the Batman IP rights when approaching the mostly, at the time, unknown studio Rocksteady Studios to make a new Batman game. Veteran writer of Batman the Animated Series and a large portion of the comic book appearances of Batman, Paul Dini, wanted to make an original story rather than adapt it from somewhere else, and thought about how the gameplay would merge while being set on Arkham Island. Games like BioShock, the Metroid series, and Legend of Zelda series were inspirations for the storytelling, atmosphere, and the uses of gadgets and abilities. But how did it all pan out? What was it about Batman Arkham Asylum that spawned the other 3 Batman Arkham games? Was it truly a good license game where playing as Batman made for a great time? Let's find out, and play this multi-format game on the PlayStation 3. Joker is up to no good yet again, causing trouble at Gotham City Hall, and is caught by Batman. He is taken to Arkham Asylum outside of Gotham City, basically the setting used as an excuse to have Batman confront many of his enemies. Batman feels Joker surrendered too easily to go back to the asylum, and it turns out he was right. Harley Quinn changes for security, the inmates escape, and Joker has a plan up his sleeve involving an asylum doctor's work, a dangerous drug formula, and the henchmen transferred after a Blackgate prison fire. Joker threatens to detonate bombs around Gotham City if anyone enters Arkham to intervene, leaving Batman isolated with a little help from Oracle. The best things about the story are its pace, about how it is isolated from other Batman stories, and its surprisingly good mixture of the dark and gritty with the fun and playful, as a Batman comic probably should be. This means that the most casual of Batman readers or viewers or players can really get immersed in the story. Not all of the Batman characters feature outside of references or name drops, but what is featured is a treat. The story also works due to the visuals and sound design. The locations on Arkham Island work so well as a setting due to the narrow, almost claustrophobic corridors, industrial gothic atmosphere, generally desaturated colours focusing on brown and green, and the lighting. All the characters are well animated too, though the pixelated CGI nature doesn't help matters. The sound is great, including the music that really gives off the vibes of a DC comic, and even sounds like a Danny Elfman score at times. The main credit of the sound work, however, really must go to the voice cast. Quinn, the Joker, and Batman were voiced by Batman the Animated Series veterans Arlene Sorkin, Mark Hamill, and Kevin Conroy, RIP, respectively. And they do a great job, with Joker especially getting so many lines.
At this rate, you'll never catch me!
Generally speaking, the presentation really makes you feel like you're in a Batman story or comic, but the gameplay also generally works here too. Batman Arkham Asylum is an action-adventure game where Batman is controllable from a third-person perspective. He has a variety of abilities and gadgets which allow him to move around, engage in combat, and investigate the setting. The early areas where you learn how to utilize most of the basic functions are linear, then there's more freedom and exploration, with some areas closed off. This game can be loosely called a Metroidvania, where you get mandatory upgrades and abilities to explore more of the world. Depending on the XP you get more optional ones that allow you to explore other optional areas, but these are not required for completing the story. The main functions are enough and strike a good balance. In fact, that's what this game does best. Balance. Batman may be a superhero, but he's neither overpowered or weak. The enemies generally strike a good balance, almost regardless of difficulty selection. Just that hard makes enemies more aggressive and sometimes hard to ascertain their combat patterns or combos. You can beat up enemies, but beware of guns that easily damage Batman. If you don't use more stealth to take out enemies from afar and close quarters, then you'll end up dead mostly by multiple gun-toting enemies. This is where Detective Mode is used, a blue-tinted visual mode that highlights interactive objects, enemies in the area, with the more dangerous gun-toting ones identified as a red X-ray, not to mention tracing characters mostly on a linear path to progress the main story. You have to use Detective Mode to figure out what to do in an area, or how to avoid detection if enemies start sensing your presence, lest you want to see that surprisingly charming comic book style game over screen over and over again.
I salute my fallen enemy! Gotta say, I thought you'd last longer.
To be fair, it's a cool idea seeing Joker and many of your enemies taunting Batman when he dies. The blue tint of Detective Mode is a visual effect that breaks the immersion of the already good visual presentation, but you'll be needing it and using it a lot. Okay, so you learned at first how to explore, progress, and use Detective Mode, but how does Batman engage in combat, get stronger, and use his abilities properly? Simple. Use a free-flowing combat system. You have 3 main buttons: attack, stun, and counter. Use these moves in an ever-changing pattern, and you can string combos which increases Batman's speed, as well as use special moves like throwing enemies or instantly kill them. Some enemies are different, like the aforementioned gun-toting enemies are, in that they use knives and other tactics, so they have to be stunned or using some other measure. And the aforementioned stealth applies to silent takedowns, snatching enemies from up high, or using explosives and more. Sometimes you must avoid detection entirely to keep hostages alive, or you get a game over. But here is what is important about combat. The more you chain combos or use variety in your techniques, the more you get the aforementioned XP or regain Batman's health. The XP is spent on the mostly optional upgrades, whether they be more armor for Batman or remote-controlled Bat-Terrains to use the boomerang idea more effectively, risk and reward, precise and quick button combinations. All this and more strike a balance and allow you to upgrade Batman as you see fit, while allowing you to still complete the story. Also, you get XP for exploring more freely more often. The villainous Riddler is not part of the story, but he leaves a variety of riddles around for Batman to solve, whether it be a trophy tucked away in a mostly out of reach spot, or solve a puzzle using the scan function of Detective Mode on a mostly obscure object or perspective of the area. These can sometimes be quite rewarding to solve on your own. Not only do you get more XP again, but you get character bios, interview tapes and so on that inform on the characters, the setting and so on in a way that is sure to please any Batman fan. There are unfortunately problems in the game that amount to more than just a few visual effects. The controls, regardless of which configuration is chosen, tend to come across as a little finicky in regards to context-sensitive functions, environment interactions, or having to tap and hold buttons precisely. An example being the scan function in Detective Mode. This can generally lead to failures or deaths that are mostly not your fault. Subjectively speaking, there can always be that one part of a game that is not great, and that is the sewer hunt with Killer Croc in the last third of the game. The checkpoint system is especially poor here. Pathways disappear or glitch when Batman or Croc is supposed to do a certain thing, and it is ultimately more annoying or infuriating than it is tense or nerve-wracking. This is subjective to be sure, right down to how good one can be in the stealth sections, but you should be able to figure those out. Speaking of Croc, the boss fights are also somewhat underwhelming. They are suitably epic as they should be in a Batman story, but almost all of them generally require the same tactics rather than use Batman's arsenal or combat in potentially more interesting ways. This does become more noticeable after a while, with the exception of the hallucinogenic fights with Scarecrow that combine backstory and 4-4 breaking that harken back to games such as Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, and Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. One could also argue the game is a bit short at the 12 to 15 hour mark, but that means that the game and its story doesn't overstay its welcome. Plus, you can go back and check for those riddles, trophies and so on you've already missed, or explore optional areas. In fact, you can also unlock challenge maps, an extra mode where you can get a high score, ranked online or otherwise, in combat or stealth scenarios partially based on the locations in the story. The combat ones are more fun than the stealth ones purely because of the combos and the occasional stealth struggles. But the bonus criterion stealth maps are fun to come back to. Additional maps can be downloaded, plus the PlayStation 3 version by itself allows you to play as Joker in the challenge maps. This exclusivity would be remedied in the Return to Arkham Collections remaster, complete with a presentation overhaul. Overall, it can be said that Batman Arkham Asylum established a legacy for licensed games and Batman games, similarly to the Batman films Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Of course, the game could have been improved at least a little in its presentation, controls, and boss encounters. But the Metroidvania-style progression, complete with a story, atmosphere, and generally faithful and above all cool control of Batman, can really make it hard to stop playing, even if the stealth sections may take a little more thought than one may think. The story and gameplay are also explained, balanced, and utilized in such a way that even those who are not necessarily into the Batman franchise will be drawn in. More Batman Arkham games were to follow, and it's not hard to see why.